I started hunting relatively late in life. I met some friends in college that were hunters. We'll call them Tom, Rick and Harry. Tom and Rick had been friends since high school. They went to college and roomed together. Harry and I were roommates down the hall. Over the course of years, we became good friends. Tom and Rick would often talk about how they would go hunting together when they were back home. Harry, whose parents were more than just well off, had several hundred acres in the upstate that the family hunted on. The first time I went with them, I just borrowed a rifle from Harry. He refers to himself as a gun enthusiast. We just call him a gun nut. He doesn't take offense, it's all in good fun. After my fourth trip, I bought my own rifle. We all remained friends after graduation. Although we aren't exactly neighbours, we aren't states away from one another either. So, every couple of months, we get together and go hunting. Sometimes it's at Tom and Rick's old stomping grounds. Sometimes at a local friends of mine place. Or somewhere Harry is leasing. At least once a year, we all get together for a week at Harry's parents' place. After hunting there, everywhere else was just second best. We arrived separately at Harry's parents' place on a Friday afternoon. I was the last to get there, having the longest drive. Tom, Rick and Harry had already cracked open cold ones and had the grill going. We greeted each other with the normal jokes and insults. After eating, moderately drinking, and catching up, we all headed off to bed. We always got up before dawn to get to the stands, which meant the first night there was never that late. We woke up early the following morning like normal. Harry and I decided to take one stand, while Tom and Rick would take another. We would rotate throughout the week so that everyone would have time to hang out. As the four of us were making our way up a trail that would split in opposite directions to head to the separate hides, we came across a dead deer. The deer was missing most of the hind quarters. It didn't look so much eaten as ripped. We were so transfixed by the sight that it was only in hindsight we realised the animal had been killed by having its neck broken. Tom asked Harry if there had been any sightings of bear or mountain lion in the area. Harry responded that there were always sightings, but no reports of animals being hunted. We brushed it off. We were armed, so as long as we kept our wits about us, everything would be fine. The dead deer was forgotten in the first 30 minutes as we concentrated on the live deer that we had come to harvest. I didn't manage to take a shot that morning, but both Harry and Rick bagged one each. Probably a good thing because Harry's was a monster, and it took both of us to carry it back to the cabin. If we hadn't both been carrying it, I wouldn't have been looking at the ground to check my footing, and would have never seen the tracks. I stopped the group to point them out. These things were huge, easily as big as my size 13 boot. Harry insisted that there were dog prints, but both Tom and Rick said there was no way that tracks that big could be a dog. They said they were mountain lion prints that had been stepped in by both the front and back foot, making them look so large. Either way, I didn't want to wait around and meet the animal that made them. So I picked up my half of the deer and we moved on. The three of them argued about the prints, all the way back to the cabin. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. Unfortunately, by dusk, the peace would be broken. The first thing to happen was disturbing, but not alarming. We were sitting around the campfire, drinking and telling stories, when we heard sounds coming from the shed where we dressed the deer. It was roughly 12 by 12 feet and held 2 chest freezers, as well as a tiled area with a drain where the deer was actually dressed. The door had a padlock on it to keep out bears, mountain lions and thieves. What we heard was the sound of something slamming into the side of the shed and then splintering the wood. Assuming it was a wildlife friend, we retreated to the cabin. Tom and Harry grabbed rifles, while Rick and I grabbed powerful flashlights to illuminate the area. We quietly exited the cabin, moving around the far side so that we would have a direct line of sight to the shed. When we had reached a good spot, Rick and I turned on the lights and pointed them at the shed. I remember it took me a good 5 to 10 seconds to actually realise what I was seeing. I just could not believe it. There, in front of us, not 35 feet away, were 2 werewolves. They were massive, each one easily standing 7 feet. And they were heavily muscled. Their arms were longer than a human's, more like a gorilla's. The hair that covered the bodies was coarse, like you'd see on a wild boar. Legs. The legs were like dog legs, with the reverse knee. The hands ended in claws, and I could see the sharp canine teeth, even from that distance. What struck me though, what I couldn't stop staring at, were the eyes. They almost seemed to glow blood red. Right then, both sets were staring at us. Behind the creatures, the door to the shed lay on the floor inside the little room. The creatures had torn it off the hinges, broken the lock, and pushed the door in. As they turned their attention towards us, Harry and Tom raised their rifles. There was very little chance that these creatures were not dangerous, and we were definitely in fear of our lives. The animal on the right moved first. Its front limbs hit the ground and it surged at us with all its strength. Tom fired first. The bullet zipped past the cheek of the monster and hit its shoulder. It didn't even appear to notice, because it didn't break stride. Earlier, I mentioned that Harry was a gun nut. Tonight, it made all the difference. In North America, outside of the grizzly bear, everything can be hunted and killed with a .308 caliber or similar rifle. I do all of my hunting with a .308. Rick uses a 7mm Mauser. Tom hunts with a 45 to 70. None of us has ever needed anything more. Harry, being both wealthy and heavily involved in shooting, hunted with a .458 lot. For the uninitiated, this is a massively powerful rifle round. It's what's called a dangerous game cartridge. It's the sort of rifle used to hunt animals in Africa. the kind that hunt you back. Lion, water buffalo, elephant, hippo. You get the idea. The 458 lot will drop these animals in charge. I shot the rifle once. The recoil was so massive, I swore never to touch the weapon again. Harry pulled the trigger, and the world exploded in noise. I watched the mountain of a bullet hit the creature just to the left of its snout. Its face cratered at the impact. What I could only assume was brain and skull flew out the back. It collapsed in a heap, sliding a few feet from the force of its own momentum. Harry expertly worked the bolt while moving the rifle to the second target. The echo of the first shot was still bounding around through the forest when the second shot went off. This caught the second creature in the right shoulder. The force turned the creature slightly. It grabbed the wounded one with the working arm. You could see blood soaking the fur on the right side of the body. It let out a cross between a yell and a howl. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared back into the forest. As the report of the second blast began to die down, we heard a terrifying sound. In the dark woods, answering howls could be heard responding to the cry of pain and anger from the creature that just escaped. As one, we ran back into the cabin. Inside the cabin was quiet. We didn't panic. We didn't shout. We simply looked at one another in silence. We knew what we had seen. We knew exactly what had happened. In hindsight, it is glaringly obvious that we were in shock, but it's hard to recognize it when it's happening to you. Rick was the first to shake himself out of it by making the most obvious suggestion. We needed to get out of there immediately. We were grabbing just the essentials to escape. Rifles, sidearms, keys, when we heard another grating, crushing sound from outside. All of us crowded at the window. What we saw were at least 6 beasts, completely destroying our vehicles. Tyres flattened, windows broken, hoods torn off, and engines destroyed. Before real panic could set in, Harry reminded everyone about the pole barn and the tractor it contained. With this much acreage, you had to have equipment to maintain it. Tom wasn't so sure about the idea. The tractor was slow and didn't have any sort of cover or cage to protect us from the beast. I had to admit that Tom had a point, but if we stayed, we were obviously dead. That's when it occurred to me. Fire. Animals, even humans, were scared of fire. Rick asked if I intended to burn the whole forest down. I hadn't, until he mentioned it. But if that's what it took, then yes, I would burn the forest down. We all just sort of looked at one another. We didn't agree to it out loud. We just sort of grabbed our stuff and started heading for the pole barn. Harry shot and killed one more of the beasts on the way there. At the barn, we wrapped rags and clothing that we had brought with us around shovels and rakes. We soaked the clothes in diesel and lit them on fire. we put several cans of diesel on the back of the tractor, and we began our slow ride out. Tom and I would hop off the tractor as we went down the trail, setting fire to the woods on either side. Harry would cover us from the tractor while Rick drove. We could see gatherings of red eyes on each side, but they wouldn't cross the flames. The couple of times they attempted to get out in front of us, Harry took care of that with the rifle. The 20-minute car ride in took us 90 minutes to get out. By the time we reached the end of the trail and made it to the paved road, the forest behind us was ablaze. It took 6 weeks to get the fire under control. Almost 1,000 acres went up in flames and 4 homes were lost. Thankfully, no one died. The fact that the fire would spread or get out of control didn't even occur to us in our blind panic to escape. We watched the news for days, praying that the fire service would put it out without loss of life. The authorities knew where the fire started. They interviewed us about it. We told them a propane tank leaked in the back of Harry's Cherokee and exploded, blowing up his car and mine. From there, the fire spread out of our control. We fled, alerting the authorities. Luckily, they couldn't prove otherwise. We all still hang out, but we don't go hunting anymore. Now it's dinner, staying at a friend's place, or going to a sporting event. It's been several years now, and the trees have grown back. Harry's parents rebuilt the cabin. He doesn't go there anymore, and they eventually stopped asking him to come. The guys won't talk about it. I've brought it up once or twice, but each time they just look down and stop talking. I think about it often. People go their whole lives without anything strange happening to them. I, quite literally, ran into a legend. I don't know why I wrote this. No one will believe. I don't have the luxury of not believing. I know.